All right, doing the editorial, I got to talk about this. Happy NFL kickoff to everybody. The game just started right as I'm talking, but what the people say, the church people say, I woke up with this on my heart. It was heavy on my heart. It was heavy on my spirit. No, it wasn't just this morning. It's been like this all off season. It's been like this for years. And so I figured I would take some time. And I know the title says quarterbacks, but I want to properly explain how you evaluate players in general when it comes to football, NFL, whatever. Because it's mainly the NFL. People really they just don't understand what they're talking about. And part of that is that's sports media. And I know I talk about them a lot sometimes, but that's one of the biggest reasons because sports media, whether individuals know it or not, at the top they understand they are built on and structured on creating multiple conversations so that people are not talking about the same thing. That way they can argue in a circle. Today was a great example when they were on First Take, one of the biggest culprits right now. They were talking about who needed a good start bet more, Pat Mahomes or Justin Herbert. Now, I clicked on this thinking that we're talking about a good start to the game so that, the team can win, analyzing the game. But I guess that's not what they was talking about. So anyway, essentially, you had one person start talking about Mahomes because it's going to be a bigger conversation if he plays bad coming off a bad Super Bowl. Then you had another person talking about his Herbert because of his career, even though they, dismissed the Mahomes coming off a bad Super Bowl, but they still quoted Herbert as coming off a bad playoff game. And his career, he doesn't have the benefit of the doubt. And then you got somebody else again talking about different things. So that's the formula. They want to create multiple situations or multiple conversations so that you can go in a circle. But unfortunately, a lot of casual fans, people on the internet, they've picked up on that habit. And so whenever we're talking about who's the best ranking in this, sports media, for a reason, they don't make it a very clear definition. They don't make it a very well-defined conversation. They do it on purpose and make it vague so that people can take it in different directions. And so when we talk about rankings, quarterback rankings, whatever, you just look at how people talk online or listen to how they talk in sports media. People are talking about different things. They're talking about different things. This person's talking about resume. This person's talking about accomplishments. This person's talking about physical ability. This person's talking about clutch moments, like all over the place. Now, obviously, definitions can be different depending on the person, but when you're trying to have a conversation in any normal, setting, you qualify what the conversation is for a reason so that we're all on the same page. So to that end, for me and for you, you might say, hey, this is how I personally rank stuff and I don't care. But that's fine. But I would say traditionally, people need to understand when we're talking about an individual ranking in a team sport like football, you have to separate the team aspects. And this is why, I hate how much they talk about quarterbacks in a vacuum. Oh, Mahomes beat Herbert. Herbert doesn't play defense. They don't play each other. That has nothing to do with anything. And Mahomes also is part of the team. Look, if I go out there, if a quarterback goes out there and throws 2 interceptions, 100 yards, and the defense gets 8 turnovers and scores 3 times and you win, that quarterback didn't beat anything. And so it's so disingenuous and it's very misleading the way people like to talk in a vacuum. When we're talking about a vacuum, as in just this individual player versus that individual player or whatever, then it comes down to skill set. That's the only true way to talk individual conversation. And I'm talking about ranking players like currently. When we're talking about who had the better career, that's a different conversation. And that's the problem, is people bring those things into an individual conversation. Talking about how many Super Bowls somebody got, how many all pros they got, how many, whatever. Yes, there's some of that speaks to their ability, but that is not the conversation we're having. You're talking about legacy and resume. And that's what I see a lot of people talk about. The biggest argument right now, speaking of Herbert, is Herbert and Jalen Hurts. Really anybody in Jalen Hurts. And I made a video or I covered this topic not too long ago where I said Jalen Hurts is not being disrespected. Everyone keeps saying Jalen Hurts is being disrespected. I'm like, Jalen Hurts is not being disrespected. Because again, every conversation about Hurts starts off with he just won a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl MVP. And look, at the end of the day, Jalen Hurts did his job. Jalen Hurts performed, but it wasn't just a Jalen Hurts game. Like, there was a whole defense that shut down one of the best quarterbacks in the game. That's part of, you can't just claim and put, as they say, put this on Jalen Hurts' jacket like it was just him, or like he doesn't have one of the best offensive lines in the game. And so then people are like, oh, you're using that against him. You can't. And this is what I'm talking about. This is why, because you're arguing two different things. You're using a team accomplishment. You're using a team concept to argue an individual's ability. Those are two different things. Again, if you want to stack up where prestige wise, where resume wise Jalen Hurts is, then you can have that conversation. But when we're talking about ability, that does not matter. A Super Bowl does not make you throw the ball with more velocity. A Super Bowl doesn't make you read a defense any quicker. It doesn't make your footwork in the pocket better. It doesn't make your situational awareness better. It doesn't. Again, people try to use that as evidence that you have skill, but that is not the same thing. Again, it speaks to it a little bit, but for the most part, that's not what's going to actually show ability. So whenever I'm talking to somebody and we're talking players and it immediately goes to Super Bowls or playoffs or this stats or all pros, I'm like, okay, we're having two different conversations now. And I'll say this I won't say prove my point, but to illustrate my point, two different things. Number one, the draft. I've been doing draft a long time, as I keep telling people. And we had a little bit of this with Shedeur this year. When we get into the draft, anybody that actually evaluates talent, because that is what we're doing, right? We're stacking up players versus players, looking at talent. And in my mind, when you're talking about who's the top 10 quarterback, who's the top 10 running back, blah, blah, that it should be the conversation. We're stacking them up. Who's the best talent? So when you do that in the draft, or even as a pro scouting department, teams have scouting departments that scout pro players for potential free agency and trades. Whenever you talk to someone evaluating talent, they don't pull out a stat sheet. We don't get to the draft and say, okay, filter who had the most passing yards in this draft. Okay, who had the most rushing yards? We don't say who was the Heisman. Okay, that should be the number one pick. That's not how we do it. In fact, I haven't done this. I plan on doing this project, but I feel like if you look at the correlation between like stat leaders and award winners to all pros in the NFL, or stat leaders and award winners in college, and what's the correlation to all pros in the NFL, it's probably not going to be a strong one. And that's based off a couple that I did look at. For whatever reason, I was like, I wonder who are like the NCAA all-time tackle leaders and stuff. And I looked at this list, and almost none of them did anything in the NFL, let alone became an all-pro. And that's just one example of many. We obviously know how many Heismans don't go on for success. So those stats, people like to bring up stats, people like to bring up accomplishments. That doesn't mean anything when we get to the draft. Why? If it was, because people say it's only about Super Bowls. So if it was only about that, if that was the end all be all to tell you how good a player is, then how come when we get to the draft, we have people coming to the league who didn't win nothing, people who weren't dynamic in college still be able to be Hall of Famers? Like, let's just use logic. We're not talking barbershop talk. We're talking about evaluation. There's no way that a team accomplishment, any accomplishment, an award, makes your skill better. And that's why it's so hard for people with the Herbert thing and everything. And again, if you listening and thinking, oh, I'm so wrong, why do you think all these GMs and coaches and scouts keep voting the way they do? Because that is how real football people look at things. When you're a coach, you don't come to practice and be like, okay, let me look at his stats from last year. Let me look at his stats from last game. No, you're looking at on the field in real life. How is he move? As I always say, player evaluation comes to three things: physical attributes, technique, positional technique, and football IQ. Those are the three things. And yes, they're subjective and they're not easily measured. But that's why you have professional coaches. That's why it's a profession. That's why you have professional scouts. And that's why you go at it a certain way. But I'm around a lot of coaches. I've talked to many scouts and talent evaluators. They don't pull out stats to say, okay, this player is better. Production is looked at. I'm not saying they don't look at it at all. I'm not saying that it doesn't mean anything, but production is not the number one thing to evaluate a player. So if you use that logic, if we go to the draft where we're evaluating players and the logic is, hey, we're not staring at stats and accomplishments, we're looking at ability, technique, IQ, then why wouldn't that also be the case when we're ranking players in the NFL? Is Saquon, see, by people's logic, Saquon wouldn't be great because if he didn't have last year, if he never went to the Eagles, then he wouldn't be, I wouldn't even say great because that's a legacy thing, but he wouldn't be the top back in the league. Okay. Now you are just proving my point once again, because he went to a different team with a different offensive line, a different defense, and that amplified his game. And you have to understand, when you're talking about individual players and you're using stats and team accomplishments, you are talking about things that are team dependent, that are amplified or downgraded based on the team that you are on. Football is the ultimate team sport for a reason. So talking about a player in a vacuum is hard. My second point is, very naturally, as we all know, it's about what you can do on the field. You could put Tom, well, I won't say Tom because he's still a little young, but if you take Troy Aikman on the field, that gold jacket is not throwing a pass for him. Those Super Bowl rings are not going to read the defense for him. His all pros or whatever he has is not going to move his feet in the pocket. The same way that Aaron Rodgers, who has multiple MVPs, the same way that Stafford, Stafford's always had great physical ability, obviously has a Super Bowl, the same way that people can say, oh, okay, they lost a step. The same way that Tom Brady in his last year, like, Tom doesn't have it as he used to. So by y'all logic, oh, Jalen won a Super Bowl. Jalen won Super Bowl MVP, so he's got to be ranked here. By your logic, any player that has all that resume should always be ranked high. That's not how we do it. We do it by what you can do, not what you've accomplished. Again, that's a legacy conversation, not a player individual evaluation conversation. So yes, if you're not putting on the film, if you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't know how to evaluate a position, then no, you're not going to be able to have those conversations. And it makes people mad who want to lean on accolades, they want to lean on stats. And it makes them mad. It's like, what are you talking about? How else can we discuss it? And I'm like, that's how I know you casual, because if you get around any coaches and stuff, that's not what we talk about. Whenever I see a player or on our team, or I see a player on another team, the first question ain't what stats did he get? We ask, how does he move? How fast is he? How strong is he? What's his pass rush like? What's his ability to man cover? What's his tackling like? Can he tackle in space? Is he a hitter? That's the stuff we talk about. That's how you evaluate a player. So between the draft and the whole, obvious, decline of a player, that should tell you right now that the evaluation, the test of a player is not accomplishments. It's ability. And so I'll wrap this up. I've been saying this for the longest time and people hate it. Some people truly hate it. And again, these are people that I know are casual football people, because this is just the truth. The only way, and I'm talking specifically about quarterbacks, the only way to truly go, because some people don't like the attribute checklist. He's got a better arm, he's got better this. Some people don't like that. I'm like, the only way that you could truly objectively measure is if you either had them play on the same team or flip-flop teams. That's the only way. I know people hate that. Some people hate the what's the word? Not fantasy, but they hate the what if scenarios. But that's literally the only way that you could do it. You think about any other test out there in natural science. The only way to see if these two products are, or which is better, we got to put them in similar situations. We got to give them the exact same situation. We got to have a variable that we can control. We got to have variables that's the same. That's the only way to truly objectively evaluate. And that's why when I rank quarterbacks, which I may or may not do because the season started, I started to do it by one prompt. If I had to put this quarterback on any random team in the NFL, who am I taking? That's how I rank them, because yes, somebody can be productive with that offensive line. Yes, somebody can be productive with that coach or that receiving core, or they could be productive in that philosophy. But I'm saying, okay, if you don't know, if it's blind, you don't know what team you're going to get, which quarterback would you take? Because that, to me, now we remove all the team factors and the things that elevate their game based on the team, and we're only looking solely at what that player brings to the team to amplify it. And so that's the only way. If you flip-flop their teams or put them on the same team, or even if you want to do my method and talk about if you were going to get a random team, and of course you got the fantasy draft where, okay, if you had to take a starter team, which quarterback would you take? Which is similar because you don't know what's going to be around that player. And that's the hard part, because we can't actually do that. So that's why people dismiss it. But that is the thought, what's the word? That's the thought exercise that gets you to that point. And for the people that say it's dumb, what do you think they do in the draft? Once again, even in, again, the pros, when you getting ready for free agency. Now, everybody doesn't do it well, but what do you think they do? They say, okay, what would he look like with us? I'm looking at what he's able to do. How does that translate to our team? That's literally the thought exercise that is done when you evaluate players. So to say, oh, it's dumb to be like, if you put, I don't even want to say certain quarterbacks because people go crazy. Let's start with a rookie. People say, oh, it's dumb to say if you put JJ McCarthy on the Raiders, he won't look the same as such and such. It's dumb. Why is it dumb? That's literally what player evaluation is. It's projection. And that's the last thing I'll say. Why some people ask why it's important, why does it matter? And I say it all the time, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Player skill set is important because it helps you project. Back to the Saquon example. You can say, well, Saquon hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. So, he's not really elite, or he's not that great. And then I say, well, okay, if we take him off the Giants, based on his acceleration, his field vision, based on his first step explosion, based on his contact balance, based on his long speed, if I put him on a team with an offensive line that's top 5, I would expect the increase in this, and this. And we saw that happen in real life when he went to the Eagles. So again, for everybody, ironically, especially the Jalen Hurts people, look at the Saquon situation and tell me it's not true. Tell me you don't understand that it's not about your accomplishments. It is about your skill set, because skill sets travel, accomplishments don't. So that's it for me. Go down comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the convo started. Thumbs up. Subscribe. Enjoy this NFL season. And thank you for listening.